Spicy.
Hello everyone, I welcome you to the video where today I'll be reviewing all of the tier 10 regular tech tree tank destroyers. I'll show you gameplay cutscenes, I'll talk through the strengths, the weaknesses of each and every one of those tanks, and in the end I'll come to a conclusion which tank I think is best suited for you, whether you're a experienced player or more of a beginner. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into the replays, and we're going to start off with the American tanks. Alright, so here we are. This is the T-124, which is one of the two tier 10 American tank destroyers. This tank comes after the T-30, which is a very, very strong tier 9 tank. I think most of you will know it. And it packs pretty much the same gun as the T-30 and as the T-124, obviously, and as the T-123. So those tier 10 American tank destroyer guns are both pretty similar. However, you can already see that this tank has got a turret, which is obviously a big advantage. However, it only turns 90 degrees to the left and 90 degrees to the right, but still, this is a huge advantage that this tank is packing, which most tier 10 tank destroyers are not. Now, this tank has got 640 alpha. As you can see, it's got a 13-second reload at best. And the gun handling is pretty okay. I mean, the gun is nothing to write home about. It's nothing absolutely insane. The gun isn't especially good. The aim time is average. The accuracy is average. DPM is average. Of course, you can play it with adrenaline like I am, and then the tank is going to get better. However, this tank is absolutely not shining like other tier 10 tank destroyers are. And I don't think that this tank is very easy to play because it doesn't have that good mobility. And it doesn't really have much armor. I mean, this tank is slower, so you may think that, well, maybe it can bounce some shots, but actually this tank is not really going to bounce many shells. I mean, the side armor isn't good. You cannot side scrape with it. Even if you try to side scrape with it and have a very slim angle, most people are still going to be able to either overmatch your side armor and go through it, or they are just going to be able to pen your turret cheeks, which are left to the right of the gun mantlet. Those are pretty weak. I mean, if a tank destroyer shoots you or any other tank that loads gold, they can pretty much just pen you in these turret cheeks. And again, the cupola, you can see it's got a huge cupola. The cupola is very poorly armored, so everything is going to go through there. And in addition, enemies are also going to be able to pen you with HE in the side and with HE in the rear. So this tank is really not a tank you want to get shot at all if you can minimize the risk of taking a shot. However, of course, you do have that turret, you have the nice alpha, you have the OK DPM, so it's not a bad tank, but I don't think it's easy to play, and thus I don't think it's suitable for beginners. Alright, so here we are for the tier 10 American tank destroyer, which is the counterpart to the T-124, if you will. This is the T-123. Now, it packs pretty much the same gun as the T-124. You can see it's got 0.1 more reload. However, I'm also having the protective kit and not the second cola, so this tank has 13 seconds of reload at best. It's got quite similar gun handling to the T-124. It's slightly better on the E3, but of course the main advantage of the E3 is that thick armor. The cupola has got the same texture as on the T-124, so I mean it looks the same. However, it's got way more armor. In fact, this tank is very hard to pen from the front, as really you don't have many weak spots. I mean, the only weak spots are the lower plate, and well, some tanks will even bounce off the middle of the lower plate because the left and the right of the lower plate are weaker armor. So this tank has got very strong weak spots. However, of course, side armor and rear armor are pretty weak, so you don't want to get shot in the side. And this tank is obviously a tank where you can just absolutely be a frontline beast. If you manage to go frontline, hull down, you can spot for your team, you can be aggressive, you can just pump out those shells whenever you're reloaded. And this tank is very strong if you use it as a sort of a battle ram. You can play aggressively in this tank. It doesn't take too much thinking. I mean, obviously it's easier to play than a T-124 or other tanks that I'll talk about in just a second, which is why I think this tank is actually pretty suitable for beginners. However, the grind to it, which goes over the tier 8 T28 and the tier 1995, those are both very slow tanks, and they're not hard to play, but they're not really that competitive because they're just too slow. This tank is not slow, don't get me wrong, it's 30 kph, that's perfectly fine. However, it is just not really that fast, but of course you've got that good armor, and on longer distances enemies are not really going to be able to pen you reliably unless they are TDs or unless they have a good RNG and aim well. So this tank, not that hard to play and more suitable for beginners than a T-124, that's for sure. Alright, let's go on to the next tank. Alright, so the next tank on my list is the Jagdpanzer E 100, which is the infamous Jagdpanzer E 100, I think I should say. It packs a 17 centimeter gun with 800 alpha, a very, very strong penetration value, 300 on the AP, 400 on the heat pretty much. I mean, the heat is just godlike. I mean, if you don't hit tracks or spaced armor, this heat just butters through pretty much anything it hits. However, of course, this comes to an expense. It is pretty slow, as you can see. 20 kph, you're not going to be able to really go faster reliably in this tank. And also the mobility is not that good, as you can see. I mean, you can see my traverse, my acceleration, my speed isn't that good. So you really have to watch out not to get outmaneuvered by mediums in this tank. And I mean, you just saw what I hit there. I hit the lower part of the turret of the K91. So this tank, I do play it with vertical stabilizers and a gun lane drive. However, I still don't really like that it has, you know, the aim time it has and the stabilization. I don't really like the gun on this tank. However, it's not that hard to play. If you are in long distances, it is actually a forgiving tank because the armor isn't that bad. Also, you can side script with this tank. You can angle your upper hull, and then make enemies bounce, which is what I'm going to be trying to do. However, here you're going to see another disadvantage of this tank. If you have to angle towards two enemies, now I have to angle towards the K91 and the VK. If I keep an angle which is not completely flat, which is like, as you can see here with the K91 bounced, I had like a 45-degree angle to him. If you can keep this 45-degree angle, you're able to get bounces. However, if you're sitting just front onto the enemy, if you're showing them you're flat on superstructure, they are just going to be able to pen you. So this tank is really about angling. It becomes way more effective when you can angle, when you're not playing in the first line, but rather in the second line and try to punish enemy mistakes. And this is why I think that this tank would be suitable for beginners, especially because of the big gun and the great pen. You don't have to aim that well, you don't have to know your weak spots that well, you're just going to be able to shoot and pretty much pen pretty often. And also do a lot of damage. So this tank is suitable for beginners. However, it is not the strongest in my opinion. So I would say it is suitable for beginners, but I really wouldn't recommend it as your first tier 10 tank. Here is the first highlight of tier 10 in my opinion. This is the Grille 15, the other tier 10 German tech treat tank destroyer. And I think it is just famously known for its absolutely insane gun. This gun packs 0.24 for accuracy, which is the best in the game. The accuracy does not get better on any gun. So you have a super accurate gun, 10.6 second reload on 640 alpha, excuse me. You got 3.6k DPM. If you use adrenaline, you can bump that up to 4k. If you use supercharger, then the shells are going to be even faster, so you're just going to have pretty much a laser gun. The only small downside, if you will, is that you actually have to aim. You know, if you can't really snapshot that well in this tank, you have to aim like to 80% of the maximum shrinking size of the aim circle. However, I mean, this tank is just the ultimate bush camper. If you're sitting in the back with this tank, you have enemies who expose themselves, and you just aim it to 100%, and you have that supercharger. I mean, this tank, it just punishes enemies, and this is also what makes this tank really strong. However, the important question is this tank suitable for beginners? My answer is yes and no. Yes, because obviously you can sit in the back and point your gun, and you're gonna hit like pretty reliably. However, the downsides are that, you know, the penetration isn't the best. It's got like 334 on the heat, which, I mean, it's not bad, but it's like the worst of all the tier 10 tank destroyers in terms of penetration values. However, the pen still isn't bad. I mean, if you know where to aim, or if you just load those gold rounds, or even if you have struggles penetrating your enemies, you can also load calibrated shells. Then this tank really doesn't have any penetration issues. So gun-wise, I think it's very suitable for beginners. However, the camo rating isn't the best. And in addition, it has a traversable turret, which also makes it easier to play. I forgot to mention. However, the disadvantage is that, and also good mobility, which also make it suitable for beginners. However, a really clear disadvantage is the stabilization, which, I mean, look at the bloom of the gun here while I'm driving. I wouldn't be able to snapshot anything. And if you get spotted, then you have no armor to rely on. So this is what sort of makes this tank harder to play, because you can't play aggressively, and because mistakes are going to be punished. At least they're going to be punished more than in other tanks. And if you really want to perfection your Grille 15 play, then you can actually really develop your play style. As you can see, you can play more aggressively in this tank. You can also be on the front line and side scrape out, not to bounce shells, but just to reduce the time you're exposed, put a shot in, and then go back into cover. So this tank, you don't have to camp in it, but of course camping is the most viable option for many players. In conclusion, this tank is suitable for beginners. It is a very strong tank, but I think that there's more suitable tanks. And to find out what those are, let's get into the next tank. An infamous tier 10 tank destroyer, it is the Russian Object 263, also known as the YOLO wagon, Stalin's boot, or whatever you want to call it. This tank goes at 50 kph. It has got 7.2 second reload, as you can see. It's got pretty good aim time, pretty good accuracy, pretty good RNG, as it's Russian, which, by the way, it's not an official statistic, it's just a meme, but of course Russian bias always counts. It's got insane DPM, 460 alpha, 7.2 seconds reload, so the DPM is really, really strong on this tank. And also compare that, like, if you add that to the mobility, then this tank is really a battle ram. However, the armor on this tank is kind of problematic. I mean, it's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it's just not what I would call good armor. The armor is very trollish, it's unreliable. The upper plate has got good armor, the lower plate is very, very weak. The drive wheels on the front can be penned on pretty much any, not front on, but if you show a slight angle, then your frontal drive wheel can be penned. And the side armor is very weak. So is the rear armor, so enemies are also going to be able to pen you with HE. And since you don't have gun depression, hills, you're going to see in just a second, I'm going to miss that shot. Exactly, hills are also a problem with this tank because of the bad gun depression. So this tank is not bad. It is situational, that's for sure, whether you get lucky or not. Also, the gun mantler is like a 50-50, whether you pen it or not. It doesn't really matter if you're loading gold. If you have enough pen, you don't have to load gold. However, you need to know where to aim. Also, on the superstructure, you have a weak spot, which enemies can hit. However, it is hard to hit, but you know they can also pen you with standard ammo. So basically, this tank, you are always relying on RNG whether enemies pen you or not, and also it is not easy to play. But it's not bad. So in my opinion, this tank is not suitable for beginners. However, the next tank I'll show you definitely is. Let's get straight into it. So this is the Object 268, the other tier 10 Russian tank destroyer. And this is the tank I was just talking about. I think this tank is really one of the best tier 10 tank destroyers because it's got 640 alpha, 12.6 second reload, which is better than on the T124 and on the T123. You have the best camo rating on tier 10. If you add that to a camo net, which you can use on this tank, then your camo gets even better, which really allows you to sit in the back, shoot enemy tanks, and really not get spotted. This tank is infamously known for not getting spotted, even though it shoots at you so many times and you just cannot spot it because the camo is just too good. Also, the gun, I mean, obviously penetration isn't a problem. This is a tank destroyer. You got very good AP pen, very good heat pen. If you load heat, you're going to be able to butter through pretty much anything you're ever going to meet. Gun handling wise, if you use a vertical stabilizer, I'm using refined gun to buff the accuracy and the gun lane drive. I mean, the aim time's pretty low. The accuracy is pretty good. The gun is just really good. There's just not much more to add there. And in addition, the armor profile is very trollish. It's not easily penned by HE rounds. I mean, enemies can still pen you in the upper superstructure in the back with HE. However, the armor, you can see on the front, it's got a pike nose. The armor is pretty trollish. Sometimes the enemies can pen you, and then you angle a bit to the left or to the right, and suddenly they can't pen you anymore because it becomes an auto bounce angle or because the armor just becomes too strong. So if you wiggle in this tank, you can really increase the value of the armor. In addition, if you are above enemies, your superstructure armor becomes even better and enemies are more likely to bounce you. And also because of that weird armor profile with the big tracks and with the space armor on the side, if enemies just get unlucky, bad RNG, they can bounce on your armor quite often. And so this tank is forgiving. It's not as forgiving as the T123, but I mean, you're not going to play on the front line as much as you are with the T123. So this tank really, really good for camping, really good for reliably doing damage, reliably, and thus I think this is one of the best tank for beginners. And also the grind is very, very smooth because I mean you have the ISU 152 at tier 8, which got a huge gun, and which is, I mean, the playstyle doesn't change. I mean, you're gonna play the tier 8 the same way as you're gonna play the tier 9, as you're gonna play the tier 10. So there's nothing new to adapt to, and you can really develop that playstyle while you're grinding. And this tank is just very suitable for beginners. But since this video is already pretty long, let's get on to the next tank. Now, this tank, I don't really think I have to give a name of this tank. I think every one of you know what the name of this tank is. It's the absolutely infamous and known to everyone who hasn't been living underneath a rock for the past 2 years. It is the FV-183. This tank packs the biggest gun in the game. It packs the biggest alpha in this game, which lies at 930 for the AP and 1300 for the Hesh. You can have 20-second reload with the double food. You can see I'm using double food. With the calibrated shells, you have very, very nice pen. You have insane alpha. The Hesh is brutal on this tank. However, there we go. That is the first downside to this gun. The aim time is bad, the accuracy is bad, and the dispersion is bad. Everything that is like soft stat like on this tank is bad. However, you are still going to seem to get hit by this tank so often because they're just camping in the back. They slap you for 1,000. Maybe you can shoot back if you get lucky. You do 500 and still you have made a negative trade of 600. However, this tank also has got its downsides. It's got a non-fully traversable turret. I think it's 30 degrees to the left and 30 to the right. No, sorry, 45 to the left and 45 to the right. And the armor is very weak. This tank doesn't have armor anywhere except for the gun mantlet, which is really, really small. If you have a look here, this is the gun mantlet. It's just sitting around the gun. It's just so weak. Like, don't expect to bounce anything with this tank. 1900 HP, also nothing to write home about, nothing crazy. And the camera rating isn't the best. Obviously, you're gonna get spotted when you fire, because I mean the gun is so big. Of course, you're gonna get spotted. Your camera rating is gonna drop by a lot. So this tank is also not that good for camping. I mean, of course, if the distance is very, very long, people are not gonna spot you. However, it is just not a really competitive tank. Now, on the one hand, this tank is easy to play because big alpha, sit in the back, punish enemies who peek. However, it is not competitive because, I mean, if enemies know how to counter you or just play very carefully, then you are going to be helpless in this tank. So, my conclusion is this tank is not unsuitable for beginners. It is suitable, but I think that they are just better tanks on tier 10. However, of course, for the fun factor, there's nothing which comes even close to pinning that 1300 alpha Hesh round. But without further ado, let's get into the next tank. So the next tank I got here for you is the Barn. This tank is infamously known for that name. Why? Well, because it's as big as a barn. Let's have a quick run on the armor. You have no armor, nothing to talk about. The turret is very weak. It's 14 millimeters of armor on the turret. Anything is going to be able to pin you with HE, even tier 1 tanks. So obviously don't expect to bounce anything with this tank. And also, don't go into the front line. Stay in the second line. Hold those 3 shells like you can see me do here. If you have a look on the consumables on the right side, you can see I have that better aim consumable and that faster intra-clip reload, which just allow me to put, there we go, 1219 damage in just 4 seconds. So this is the strength of this tank. It's got a good autoloader, and with those consumables you can really pop out a lot, and I really mean a lot of damage very reliably, because the gun is good. It's got good pen, good accuracy, good aim time, good everything. However, this tank is not a tank which is very suitable for camping, because you're going to fire once and then you have 3 seconds intra-clip reload without those consumables. So if you hit someone who's far away, you're going to hit them once and then they have 3 seconds to get back into cover. And even if you hit them twice, you still only did 600. And hitting an enemy twice for 600 or hitting him once for 600, you know, there's just a difference. Other tier 10 tank destroyers can hit once for 600. So this is the advantage. In this tank, you really want to be able to put those 3 shells into enemies in order to make it worth it. And the mobility isn't the best. I mean, it's not bad. However, this tank is big. It doesn't have good camera rating. You are going to be focused by absolutely anything, because obviously if they hit you, they are going to pen. So this is a guaranteed pen. Whatever hits, it pens. So it is not very easy to play. It is not very easy to do well in. And also, the grind to it isn't really the most pleasant. I mean, it is not a bad grind to it, but there are just more enjoyable grinds. So this tank, not suitable for beginners in my opinion. No armor, not easy to play. But let's get on to the next tank. Okay, so let's take a look at the tier 10 Japanese tank destroyers. This is the Hori Type 3. Now this tank packs a 560 alpha gun, 10.1 second reload, 3.2 seconds of aim time, good accuracy as I'm using the refined gun, so it's less than 0.3, so very good accuracy. Good snapshotting capabilities, as you can see. It also has AP as standard ammo, gold AP as premium ammo, which is a speciality of this tank. Most other tanks either have APCR as special ammo, or gold ammo, or premium ammo, whatever you want to call it. This tank, however, it's got AP, which is an advantage because it doesn't suffer from that spaced armor and the track disadvantage that which heat shells suffer from. And also, this tank has got the second highest penetration amongst tier 10 tank destroyers, and the golden AP rounds only lose 15 alpha compared to the standard AP. So the gold rounds in this tank, they are really good. However, disadvantages are the armor. The armor isn't bad, but it's pretty trollish. It's pretty flat on the front. I mean, the armor layout isn't very good. The design of this tank isn't very smart. You can see it's bloody long. It has 90-degree angled frontal plates, which also reduce the effectiveness of the armor. And the side armor is pretty weak. People are going to be able to penny with HE in the sides and the rear. But enough of the disadvantages. Mobility, pretty good. You can camp with this tank fairly well. If you pop adrenaline, you've got reasonable DPM. This tank isn't bad for camping. It's not hard to play. It is hard to do very well in because obviously mobility isn't bad, but it's not excellent. So really getting consistent, very, very good results in this tank isn't impossible, but it's not easy. Well, doing very well isn't easy. However, this tank is still suitable for beginners, in my opinion. It's not hard to play. Sit in the back, use that good pen, butter through enemies. If you've got any problems with penning, just load the gold. Good accuracy, good aim time, good shell speed. I mean, everything about this tank is good if you are just considering the camp factor. So this tank is definitely suitable for beginners, and also the grind towards this tier 10 tank is pretty enjoyable. And this next tier 10 tank destroyer is going to be the WZ-113 GFT, which is the tier 10 Chinese tank destroyer this time. It packs a 640 alpha gun. It's got pretty good gun traverse to the left and to the right. It has 12.6 seconds of reload, which is the same as on the 268, so it's got better DPM than an E3 and an E4. And also, it has got surprisingly good armor, in my opinion. You can see that it's got a very simple armor layout. It's got that classic lower plate and this slightly angled superstructure. However, the superstructure is a dummy thick, and if you angle it just slightly, then many enemies are gonna bounce even their gold shells off from you. So this tank, it does have surprisingly good armor. However, the lower plate is weak, as it is on many tanks. And if you have a look at my consumables on the right hand side, it actually has those better aim, better accuracy consumable. So this tank can really buff its gun significantly for about 25 seconds if you use the consumable duration boost. You can use it in the equipment tab. Now, this tank, it's got good armor, it's got good mobility in my opinion. It's also got a good gun. I mean, the pen, you're not going to have to struggle with your penetration values. I mean, the AP pen is sufficient for many tanks. If you have any problems penning, load the gold and you're just going to butter through. Obviously, you're not going to butter through like you are in a Hori, or like you are going to do in a Hori or in a Jagdpanzer 100. However, I mean, this pen still is very much sufficient. Easy to play. You can camp. You can put in big old alpha rounds. You've got good DPM. However, the armor on the sides and the rear is weak. It's not as weak as on a 263 per se, but enemies are still going to be able to penny with HE in the back, superstructure, and some even in the side. So definitely a tank to keep an eye on what kind of parts of your armor you are showing to the enemy. Still a very good tank, and in my opinion it is suitable for beginners also because the grind towards it is pretty enjoyable. Those tier 8 and tier 9 Chinese tank destroyers are pretty competitive, and they also teach you the playstyle of this tank. So, which is the Baguette 155 or Foch 155. This tank packs really good mobility, 50 kph, really strong horsepower engine. You can use the engine boost, so mobility really good on this tank. Armor wise, the frontal armor is good on this tank. You've got very strong gunmetal armor. Also, the design of the armor is pretty good. The angles on the plates are pretty good. You are going to be able to bounce many shells. However, obviously, the weak spots, you can see the Baguette on the left hand side of this frontal superstructure. And also this commander's hatch with a machine gun on the top right. So those are obviously the weak spots on this tank. Not easy to hit, especially if you wiggle or if you are in longer distance. So this tank, in my opinion, is not a bad tank. Also, the gun, 7.1 second intro load with 560 alpha and 13 seconds reload time for the entire clip give this tank an absolutely brutal DPM. And the penetration on this tank is actually really good. The AP pen is surprisingly above average, and the heat pen is so good that you're just really going to butter through your enemies even more than you are going to do on Object 268 or on Grille 15s or on E4s, E3s, whatever. The heat pen on this thing is absolutely insane, especially if you use calibrated shells, which I would recommend you do, because the calibrated really give this tank crazy pen. I think it's got 420 on the heat. I mean, brutal tank. However, the armor on the sides is pretty weak, and also the alpha isn't that big, so this tank is more of a tank where you want to cruise around the map and find positions where you can play aggressively, but where you're also not in the first line of fire, because this tank's armor doesn't hold up that well. Especially if many tanks fire at you, then you really are going to get pinned. So, and you can also see that the gun handling isn't really the best. It's got quite long aim time. The accuracy isn't, it's nothing that insane. So this tank is good, yes, but for more experienced players. And it's also not that good at camping because it doesn't pack as big of a punch. Camera-wise, it's good, but you know, there are just other tanks which camp better than this tank does. So, in my opinion, this is not suitable for beginners. Right, now, we've gone through each and every one of the tier 10 regular tech tree tank destroyers. Let's have a look at my conclusion, and I'll tell you which tank I think is best suited for you. Surprise, it is the Object 268, of course. I think you may have guessed if you didn't already know it. This tank is, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best. It's definitely the top 3 of the tier 10 tank destroyers. This tank features a good armor, good camo, a good gun, good mobility, Russian RNG, really dumb side armor where you're just going to get ridiculous bounces. So, I mean, this tank is not hard to play. It's very good at camping. It has a very strong gun. It's got good camo, and it has, I mean, like, there's nothing bad about this tank. So this tank is really suitable for beginners. Also, the grind is very enjoyable. So this tank is, in my opinion, the best tier 10 tank destroyer if you are more of a beginner. However, even if you're still even if you are an experienced player, this tank is still a very good tank. It is also suitable for you. So this tank suitable for everyone, and it's just hands down really. I'll go even further. I'm going to say this is the best tier 10 tank destroyer. Now, in the second spot, we've got the Grille, in my opinion. This tank is also suitable for beginners, but I think it is just a little bit less suitable for beginners because of that worse camo rating and because of that worse armor compared to the Object 268. But still, this tank is very good. Also because of the gun, because of the mobility, and just because of the DPM. I mean, this tank has the best gun amongst all of the tier 10 TDs. However, it's just the armor and the camo rating which make the 268 better. But this tank is still a very good tank for beginners, and also a very good tank for experienced players. And if you are an experienced player, then you can do better in the Grille than in the 268. However, this tank is harder to play than the 268 if you want to do really well in it. And I think that the T123 is coming in the third spot because of its very strong armor. This tank is really forgiving. It's got a good gun, and it is not hard to play. You don't really have to use many brain cells and to do well in this tank. So it's pretty noob proof, if you will. This tank is going to do well if you camp. It's going to do well if you go on the front line. It is not going to do well when you have to fight against mobile enemies, but it's still really easy to play and a very competitive tank. So this tank definitely comes in the third spot. However, the gun is worse than on the 268 and then on the Grille. And the mobility is as well. But this tank is still a very competitive tank, and thus it ranks on rank number 3. If you have any recommendations, just feel free to like, share, and sub to my channel. I will be making more guides and reviews in the future. If you want me to review any tank, just leave me some feedback in the comments. And as per usual, I will read through each and every one of your comments. And you may have noticed, I have bought a new mic, which is a Rode microphone. I think it's got very nice tone quality. Tell me what you think about it. Do you like the sound quality? Did you like the video? I sure hope you did. I say thank you for watching my video. Snake out.